here on impeachment. What does he think about those in the House pursuing it?
Complete nonsense. Even Jerry Nadler said, oh, impeachment's just a term. This is a process. They need to get a messaging meeting, and they need to read the Constitution of the Democratic Party. Americans, the Congress work for you, they work for you, and they're wasting your money and their time on trying to impeach a president where there are no high crimes and misdemeanors. They thought the Mueller report would be the end all. They even had Bob Mueller come and talk about the Mueller report, and it was a disaster. So they work for you. Tell them to vote on the USMCA, get that trade deal done. Tell them drug pricing, infrastructure, keep this great economy humming along, and stop the nonsense of harassing and embarrassing this president and the people around him when you have no constitutional legal basis to do so.
This is an increasingly fraught Kellyanne Conway doing what she does best, whataboutisms and distractions, this time with impeachment ramping up in the House. She says that Congress is wasting the American taxpayers' money and time, which is ironic coming from an administration that has already spent more than $340 million on golf vacations for the president. The Secret Service alone has had to spend $500,000 just on golf carts. And last time I checked, I wasn't sure of any job in the United States that allowed its employees 300 days to go to vacation resorts, the vast majority of which are spent on the golf course. So the fact that the person with the most important job on the planet has found the time to spend a third of his presidency on vacation is simply indefensible, even for someone who's made a career out of defending the indefensible Kellyanne Conway. But predictably, it gets worse from there, as she suggests that the Mueller report and Robert Mueller's subsequent testimony were a disaster for the Democrats. And while I totally understand how she'd want that to be true, just repeating it over and over isn't going to will it into existence. Because first of all, the report and testimony deflated Trump's biggest talking point, that the 2-year investigation had completely and totally exonerated him.
There was no collusion with Russia. There was no obstruction, and none whatsoever. And it was a complete and total exoneration.
It didn't. Mueller's report said it didn't, stating explicitly that it does not exonerate him. And Mueller clarified this point even further himself.
We needed to go forward only after taking into account the OLC opinion that indicated that a president, a sitting president, cannot be indicted.
So the report did not conclude that he did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what about total exoneration? Did you actually totally exonerate the president?
No.
Now, in fact, your report expressly states that it does not exonerate the president.
It does.
But beyond the report not just failing to exonerate Trump, it was, in reality, devastating for him. It outlined 10 instances of obstruction of justice, from pressuring Comey to end his investigation into Mike Flynn, to trying to get then Attorney General Jeff Sessions to unrecuse himself, to firing FBI Director James Comey before telling the Russians that the pressure is now taken off, to trying on multiple occasions to have Mueller removed after the special counsel probe was started, to trying to get Sessions to limit its scope, to editing Don Jr.'s statement about the Trump Tower meeting, to his demand that White House counsel Don McGahn lie about Trump trying to get him to fire Mueller, which McGahn refused to do, to dangling pardons for Flynn and Manafort, to trying to intimidate Michael Cohen when he cooperated with prosecutors. And just to be clear, one instance of obstruction of justice is already impeachable, and you don't even need to be successful in obstruction. The mere act of attempting to obstruct justice is a crime and was literally included in Richard Nixon's articles of impeachment. So I'm not sure on what planet the White House could consider this a win, although I guess Kellyanne Conway might say that it's an alternative planet. But she goes on to frame holding Trump accountable as some binary choice between impeachment and legislating. It's not. Much to her dismay, Democrats are able to walk and chew gum at the same time. In fact, the Democratic majority has managed to pass over 50 bills covering election security and voting rights, and lowering prescription drug prices, and protecting coverage for pre-existing conditions, and universal background checks and veterans issues. And for the first time in 2 years, it's also exercised its constitutional duty of oversight, finally holding hearings into a slew of crime and corruption that this administration has committed with impunity under Republican rule. It's the GOP who refuses to govern, to take up any of the Democratic bills in the Republican-led Senate, to act on gun violence and climate change and election security. And it's not a secret. Republicans literally brag about it.
Think of me as the Grim Reaper. None of that stuff is going to pass. None of it.
So Kellyanne Conway can frame this as one or the other, but Democrats have been the ones to do both, while the right refuses to do anything at all. Of course, that's not the way she presents it, because she, like the rest of the GOP, treats their voters like they're brain dead. But in an appearance that is essentially all lies, here's the one that stands out the most. She claims that Democrats have no legal basis to impeach the president, but their job is quite literally to conduct oversight on the president and, as is the case here, to move forward with impeachment when necessary. It's in the Constitution. In other words, what she's trying to convince us now is that the Constitution is unconstitutional. The problem for Kellyanne Conway is that her tired strategies don't work anymore, and the problem for Trump is that the government is finally starting to operate like it should. And while they're both doing everything humanly possible to change that reality, their efforts are
complete nonsense.